Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to discuss a fascinating question. And this question is going to address really at the core of what it means to be a Jew. Maybe it's connected to even what we're talking about, anti-Semitism in the news recently, and what we can all learn and take out from there. So a little bit of background. We are reading this week in the Torah the third portion, the portion of Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is all about Avraham Avinu. So the Hasidic masters would say like this: the first portion of the Torah begins great, but it ends very sad. Because it ends with, starts off great, the creation, Adam and Eve, but it ends with the people being corrupt and God regrets giving them extended life. The second portion is the portion of Noah, the portion that speaks of the flood. Terrible beginning. The world is destroyed, flooded, but a great end because Abraham is born. So the first portion is happy beginning, sad end. The second portion is a sad beginning and a happy end. The third portion, Parshas Lech Lecha, is the first portion. That entire portion, we live with Avraham Avinu, so the entire week is a happy week. The entire Lech Lecha is a reason for a Jew to be joyous. Finally, we meet the first Jew, Avraham. Finally, we get to live with Avraham. We get to study Avraham and Avraham's life. There could be nothing happier for a Jew than connecting with our ancestor Avraham. And as we say in English, the rest is history. From here, it's all great. Fantastic. A few hiccups along the way, maybe. So here is a question we'll open up with. It's a question that a colleague of mine, Rabbi Aaron Moss from Sydney, Australia, received. It's an email that reads as follows. Question. Although I was raised in a traditional home, was bris and bar mitzvah, I have never had any faith or religious belief. I am now age 34 and would describe myself as an atheist. I have no wish to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, and my will also make this clear. And I've married a non-Jew in a civil ceremony. My question is, can I consider myself officially non-Jewish? Am I effective opting out, or do I need some sort of form or dispensation to be officially no longer Jewish? Many thanks for your help with what is perhaps an unusual question. Best wishes, signed by Edward. Okay. What?
That no matter what religion they convert to, Catholic, whatever, Buddhism, you are still a Jew. You're born a Jew. You have a Jewish shama, and you are still a Jew, no matter what cemetery you end up in.
Okay, very good.
Still a Jew.
Very good. This is the question that was asked to Rabbi Aaron Moss in Sydney, Australia. We'll get to what he answered in a little bit. Okay, remember that question. Now let's get to Avraham Avinu. The opening words of this week's parsha in the source sheet, it is source number 1, Bereshis, Genesis, chapter 12, verse number 1. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, and God says to Avram, Lech lecha mi'artzecho, go forth from your native land, from your birthplace, from your father's home, and to the land that I will show you. And I will make for you a great nation. I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you. And I will make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. And those who curse you, they themselves will be cursed. And all of the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Pretty fascinating. God's words to Avraham Avinu. Want to say? Pretty good. No?
Yeah.
Here's the question. Nachmanides asks this question. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman asks the following question. Who's Avraham? Why does Avraham deserve this? What's up over here? God all of a sudden appears to Avraham and tells him, leave from where you are now, and I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to give you blessings, riches. The whole world is going to bless themselves by you. What did he do for this?
He sees the future God.
Where in the Torah do we learn anything about what Avraham did to deserve this? And the answer is nowhere. There is nowhere in the Torah that tells us. You know what information we have about Avraham Avinu? In the end of last week's portion, we have that there was a gentleman named Terach. Terach had 3 sons, Nochor, Avram, and Haran. Haran, his son, died during his father's lifetime. Avram and Nochor married women. And Terach and Avram left for Kasdim. They left their place. And that's it. Next thing we know is God's giving Avram these blessings. God's telling him, leave where you live now, go forth from here, and I'm going to shower upon you everything. And the Ramban asks the simple question, what in the world is going on over here? This seems to go against everything we're used to in the Torah. Let's take, for example, last week. Last week, we read all about who was the main character in last week's Torah portion. Noah. What happened? What did God tell Noah to do? God told Noah, I'm going to destroy the world, but you build an ark. I'm going to choose you. Why did God choose Noah? What did God want from Noah? Well, God wanted from Noah to repopulate the world. We're going to restart civilization, human civilization from you. Great. Why Noah? Why was he chosen for this mission? Well, we learned last week why. Let's read source number 2. Noah found favor with God, whereas everyone else was corrupt. Everyone else was morally depraved. Noah found favor in the eyes of God. And what did we read last week? God complimented Noah. Why did God call Noah, who remembers? Righteous, perfect, in his generation, fine. However you learn it, he was definitely righteous. He was definitely perfect for his time. So if I'm going to turn to you and say, why did God choose Noah? You're going to tell me why. Torah tells us why. Because he was a tzaddik. He found favor. He walked in the path of God. That's why God chose Noah. If you're going to choose someone to give blessings to, what they deserve for these blessings, let me know. Moses is chosen for the greatest leader of the Jewish people. Well, what do we know about Moses? We know that he was born, put into a little basket, put in the corner of the river, right? The Pharaoh's daughter, Bati, came and took him and raised him in her palace. That's all we know. But then Torah introduces us, Moses grew up, he matured, and he left the palace. What happened next? Anyone remember?
He defended a slave.
Oh, very good. Let's read text number 4. Vayehi bayam u'mahem. Sometime after that, V'yigdal Moshe, and Moses grew up. Vayetzi elachav, he went out to his brothers. Vayar b'sivloisam, and he witnessed their labors. Vayar ish mitzri, and he saw an Egyptian person, Maka ish ivri me'achal, he was striking a fellow of his Hebrew brothers. So he goes out and he sees a Jew being beaten. What does he do? What does Moses do? Vayife and koi v'choi, he looks this way, he looks that way, and he sees no one is around. So what does he do to the Egyptian? He knocks him out. He kills him. He buries him in the ground. You're not going to kill my brother. You're not going to beat up my brother. He doesn't run away. He doesn't make like he didn't see. He doesn't say, oh, I grew up in the palace. I can't deal with this petty stuff. Sorry, guys. send an email, speak to my secretary. I'm going to try to do my best to help you. No. He gets down and dirty. The next day, Vayetze, Vayom Hasheni, on the second day he goes out. Now there are two Jews fighting one with another. Yesterday was an Egyptian beating a Jew. Now it's one Jew striking another Jew. And he tells the wicked one, why are you striking your fellow? What's this business of using hands? What's this business getting physical one with another? He tries to break it up. And the story goes further. He has to run away to Midian. And in Midian, he sees the daughters of Yisroi, who were his shepherds. And the male shepherds were abusing them. What does he do? He stands up for them. Women's rights. Now, if I were to ask you, why did God choose Moses to be the leader of the Jewish people? We have enough information here to see what type of person Moses was, what type of personality this was, what type of defender of justice he was. Great. So maybe we don't know everything about him. We certainly don't know everything about him. Torah doesn't give us precise description of everything, but give us enough background information to know why God chose Moses. Seems like a great candidate. The general rule in Torah is found in Leviticus chapter 26, verses 3 and 4. Text number 5. If you follow my laws, and you observe my commandments, and you do them, I'll grant you your rains in their season. So that the earth shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field their fruit, and it goes on and on to give blessing. In other words, simply put, when you read this Chumash, you see like this. God says, you want blessings? I have blessings for you. But you got to behave. You behave well, you get blessings. Moses proved himself, God shows him. Noah proved himself, God shows him. And we find this clearly when God spoke to Solomon, King Shlomo HaMelech. In Kings chapter, in Melachim Aleph, Kings 1, chapter 3, verse 13. And I will further grant you long life if you will walk in my ways and observe my laws and commandments as did your father David. In other words, God tells Shlomo HaMelech, you want the blessings? You want me to be with you? It's contingent upon you walking in my ways and doing my mitzvahs like your father David did. So we understand why Shlomo HaMelech is blessed. He follows his father's footsteps and he's blessed. So the Ramban asks, this is the question of Nachmanides. This is the question of Nachmanides. You give a look in the entire Torah, and this is what we find. There is a theme. There's a method. God works in a very obvious way. So what happens with Avraham? We know nothing about him. Torah doesn't tell us he did anything. And yet God comes and says, you're going to be the father of my people. You're going to be the first Jew. Leave your father's home. Leave your birthplace. Leave your land. I'm going to show you where to go. And there I'm going to make you a great nation and bless you. And everyone in the world is going to look to you for blessing. Why Avraham? Now, the truth of the matter is, as with many of our great sages and the history that we have, the information is on the Torah, but we know a lot from the Gemara and from the Medrash, from different commentaries. Avraham Avinu went on self-sacrifice. It's even hinted to in the Torah. Why his brother Haran died, it says Haran died. Why is the Torah telling us Haran died? So Rashi quotes over there very famously and says that There was a story basically with Terach. Terach, Avram's father, was an idol worshiper like everybody else in his day. And Avraham rejected this because Avram was using his intellect to figure out that there has to be, as we spoke a little bit last time, there has to be a creator. There has to be one being that created all of this, who put all of, he studied nature till to the point that he realized that nature must have a creator too. There must be someone who put all of the laws into nature. So he rejected his father's idol. He smashed them. They brought him to Nimrod. Nimrod was the king. Nimrod threw him into a fiery furnace. That's one of the reasons why it's called Ur Kasdim, the fire of Kasdim, according to some opinions. And miraculously, so what happened was like this. Haran, who was Avram's brother, was standing on the fence. They asked him, what do you believe in? You're Avram's side or you're with us? So Haran said, I'll wait and see what happens to Avram. If he gets thrown into the furnace and he doesn't come out, so then I'm with you guys. But if he'll make it out somehow, let's see, side with him. Avram was thrown in and he made it out by miracle. Haran said, I'm on Avram's side. They said, you're with him, no problem. Your turn, get in there. And he never walked out. So we do see some of Avram's greatness, not in the Chumash, but in other sources. Why and how Avraham was chosen by God to be the first Jew, and how he discovered this on his own. How he came to the realization that there must be only one God, creator of heaven and earth. One God who orchestrated and put everything else into play. Who manages and controls everything in this universe, that which we know about and that which will still be discovered. That was Avram, fine. But in Chumash, you got to give us something. We get nothing. How could this be, asks Nachmanides. Good question. Good question. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to offer today 3 answers for this question. The first answer is the answer that Nachmanides gives. He asks the question and he gives an answer. He answers like this. Number 7. Gary, you want to read number 7? The source sheets, number 7.
Ramban on Genesis.
Ramban on Genesis, chapter 12, verse 12.
However, the reason for God's promising Abraham this reward is that the people of of the Chaldees did him much evil on account of his belief in the Holy One, blessed be he, and he fled from them to go to the land of Canaan, carrying for a time in Haran, whereupon the Eternal told him to leave these places as well, and to fulfill his original intention that his worship be dedicated to him alone, and that he call upon people for the worship of the name of the Eternal in the chosen land. There he would make his name great, and these nations would bless themselves by him, not as they treated him in of the Chaldees, where they abused and cursed him, put him in prison or in the fiery furnace. He further told Abraham that he will bless those who bless him, and if some individual will curse him, he will be cursed in turn.
So what does he answer? Give it to us in a nutshell. What does Ramban answer?
That God,
Why did God choose? Why did God tell this to Avram?
because he
Why did he promise him this reward?
in believing in God and rejecting idol worship.
Where do you see this in the Torah?
It wasn't in the Torah. It was in the commentaries.
No. But he's learning it in the words of the Torah. In other words, he's saying the only thing we know about Avraham is that God tells him to leave Ur Kasdim, leave the place where you are. Now the truth is he had already left Ur Kasdim. But in other words, you see from what God told him what God was trying to accomplish. That's what he's saying. Avraham was, in other words, he's saying God was addressing a problem that Avraham had. Avram's problem was he was being abused where he lived. So what did he try to do? He left that location. The community wasn't nice to him. So Avram figured they're not responding well to the message of the one God. They're not responding well to my monotheistic belief. They're rejecting it. Not only they're rejecting it, but it's getting dangerous for me. So Avram says, I'm going to pick myself up and leave from here. So God tells him like this, leave. He thought he was going to move to one location. God says, no. I got you back. I see what you're doing for me. We're gonna blow this up. This is gonna go viral, but not here. Not here. It's not the right location for it. I'm gonna show you where the right location is, and over there, it's all gonna really go viral. That's where it's really gonna take on a whole life of itself, and the whole nation is gonna start from you. So where is that? I'll show you where. I'll show you where that land is gonna be. You need to be in that land in order for the message to spread. So God was addressing a problem that Avraham had. He was running away from being abused. He was running away from being terrorized by the local people. He was thinking, I'll move to a different city. God says that you're right. Leave there and where you are now too, and go somewhere else. And that's where you'll be able to continue your message. And that's where the blessings will flow. It helps us understand a little bit, but it doesn't really address so well the core question, which is, what did Avraham do? So yes, we learn from what God told him, and this must have been what Avraham was struggling. The fact that God said, leave here and go somewhere else, must have been that the location was the problem. Why was the location Avraham's problem? Because what his message, the local people were pushing back in a very harmful way on his message. So he had to leave. He was forced to leave. They forced him out of town. Once he was forced out of town, God says, that I'll show you where to go. I'll lead you now to where this is going to really, if you continue in this way, it's really going to turn out to be the blockbuster, the really amazing thing that you were hoping, that you, Avraham, are hoping for. That's what Nachmanides offers. One answer. Many years after Nachmanides, in the city of Prague, there was a great sage, famously known by the name the Maharal of Prague. The Maharal of Prague. If you go to Prague today, in the Jewish quarter there's a famous golem. He was famous for making the golem. There's a shul today called the Altanoi Shul, I believe it's called. The Maharal Shul, his actual shul, where he prayed, where he served as rabbi, where they say the golem was put to sleep upstairs in the attic, still exists today. It was spared from all the destruction that happened in Europe over the centuries. And that shul is still there, 500-600 year old. Since he was 1500s, he was served as the rabbi. I was in the shul. You were there too. So the Maharal was a famous Jewish rabbi, brilliant scholar, philosopher, Kabbalist. And he offers the following explanation. He says like this, you know why the Torah doesn't tell us what Avraham did to deserve the reward? Because, pay attention to this, because Avraham's relationship with God was not one single act. It was a wholesome, transcendent devotion and dedication to God. God chose Avram Avinu because Abraham was fully dedicated with every fiber of his being to God. Noach was a good guy. But Noach's relationship with God was, well, maybe one-dimensional. It was specific to certain behaviors, following certain laws. He checked all the boxes maybe, but he himself considered himself and felt himself as independent from God. I, Noach, am doing all the things I'm supposed to do. And likewise, all the other greats before Avraham. God chooses Avraham. God is choosing Avraham as the father of the Jewish people. He is the first patriarch. He will be the one to literally father the people, God's chosen people. So God chooses Avraham. Why does God choose Avraham? Because Avraham didn't feel himself at all as an independent from God. He felt himself as an extension of God. There was no option not to listen to God by Avraham. There was no option to reject God. There was no option to walk away from God. There wasn't an Avraham who happened to do the right thing, who always did the right thing. Avraham himself couldn't not do the right thing. Why couldn't he transgress? Because in Avraham's psyche wasn't an option. I am an extension of God. I'm here with a mission to spread a message, to be a light to the world, to teach them about one God. Reject the nonsensical idols, reject the beliefs, all of your different ideologies and idolatries and all this stuff. Shtusim, nonsense. I'm going to teach you that it's nonsense. I'm going to show you how everything comes from Hashem Echad. One God. And that's why God chooses Avraham Avinu to be the father of the Jewish people. In the Mishnah, in Ethics of Our Fathers, there's a beautiful Mishnah. Gary, just 1 second. We didn't finish the Ramban's explanation, because on the next page is the continuation of the Ramban's explanation. Well, let's just finish it up, because I don't want anyone to say that I gypped you. This then is the meaning of this portion of scripture. The Torah, however, did not want to deal at length with the opinions of idol worshippers and explain the matter between him and the Chaldeans in the subject of faith, just as it dealt briefly with the matter of the generation of Enosh and their thesis concerning the idol worship which they instituted. In other words, Torah doesn't have time. Simon was saying earlier, not every mishagas that everyone has to be dealt with, has to be mentioned, has to be given credence to. Why do we care? Torah is not in the business of telling you about every person's idea and theory that they came up with and how Avraham rejected it, and every single conversation that they had. So Torah doesn't, in general form, Torah tells us, in a very abstract form, Torah tells us about what Avraham did in order to testify. Let's get back to the Mishnah. Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 5, Mishnah 16 says like this: Kol ava shitluya b'davar. Any love that is dependent on something, batel davar, if that something ceases, so what's going to happen to the love? B'tela ava, the love is going to cease. V'she'ena tluya b'davar. But if you have love that is not dependent on something, eina b'tela la'olam, the love will never cease. Right? If you love somebody for their good looks, the moment they don't look good anymore, what happens? Love. If you love somebody for their money, as soon as there's no money, what happens? Anything that you love someone because of that is all dependent on something. The moment that thing is gone, the relationship is gone, the love is gone. But if you love somebody not because of something, it's not dependent on anything. You just love them because you're in love with them. So then, doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing. It doesn't matter if it's dark or light. It doesn't matter if you're hungry or if you're thirsty or if you're well fed. It's irrelevant. The love will endure. And he goes on to tell us an example, the Mishnah. You read it by yourself. Says the Maharal of Prague, God's love to Avraham and Avram's love to God isn't and was never dependent on anything. If Torah would tell us that Avram was a great guy because of X, that would mean, why did God choose Avraham? Because Avraham did this. So if you want to have a relationship, an Abrahamic-like relationship with God, if you do this, you can have one. But if you don't do this, if you transgress on this, so what happens to your relationship with God? It's gone. Why? Because it was always dependent on something, on some type of behavior. God didn't start his people, the Jewish people, connecting them with some type of behavior. For sure, Avraham displayed and exhibited devotion and dedication to God. Many stories about that. But there's not one story that is because of that. Avraham did this, and that's why God said, I like that. You're righteous. You're good. You showed me something. Excellent. Now we can start a Jewish nation from you. It wasn't that. It was a all-encompassing, overarching, transcendent connection that God shows in Avraham, and that Avraham displayed and felt as his connection from Hashem. Now we can understand the answer to the question that we asked earlier. Let's get back to Rabbi Moss for a moment before we get to the third explanation. Let me read to you what you remember the email that I read earlier? Yeah?
I want to a waiver stuff in Jewish.
I'll read it again quickly. Although I was raised in a traditional home, was bris and bar mitzvah, I've never had any faith or religious belief. I'm now 34 and would describe myself as an atheist. I have no wish to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. My will also make this clear, and I've married a non-Jew in a civil ceremony. My question is, can I consider myself officially non-Jewish by my effective opting out? Or do I need some sort of form or dispensation to be officially no longer Jewish? Many thanks for your help with what is perhaps an unusual question. Here's the answer. Dear Edward, I would like to help you, but I feel there's nothing I can do. According to your question, you have done everything possible to negate your Jewishness. In practice, you do not keep Jewish tradition. In belief, you're an atheist. In family life, you've married a non-Jew and thus won't have Jewish children. And even in death, you're determined not to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. One would think that all this would be enough to confirm your un-Jewishness. But no, for some reason, you're still unsatisfied. You still feel Jewish. So much so, you feel you need official dispensation. And so, being an atheist, who do you turn to solve this problem? A doctor, a psychiatrist, the civil celebrant that married you? No, you turn to a rabbi. I'm reminded of the child who ran away from home, but ended up just going around and around the block because his parents told him never to cross the road by himself. I'm sorry, Edward. There's nothing more you can do. You are as Jewish as Moses, Ariel Sharon, and the chief rabbi of Wales. In fact, it seems that being Jewish is the most dominant factor of your personality. It's even influencing the place where you want to be buried. Why would an atheist care about where they're buried? Edward, Jewishness is not a belief, a feeling, a conviction, or a lifestyle. It's a state of being. We can either celebrate it or fight against it, but it will always be there. So why not celebrate it? Emes. The Maharal of Prague. The Maharal of Prague says, this started from Avraham. There's no opt-out clause. You can never make yourself un-Jewish. You can't get out of it. Why? Because there was no opt-in. You didn't have to pay in. You didn't have to do anything to get in. It's just a state of being. You are Jewish. What that means to every individual will be something else. But you're still Jewish, whether you embrace it or not. Avraham Avinu, Abraham our father, was chosen by God with no background information in the Torah. because there was nothing that God did, nothing that Avraham did specifically, that was the catalyst why God shows up. It was fathering a nation via a connection that runs deeper than any behavior or misbehavior. This is what the Maharal of Prague explains. Everyone understand this? Yeah? You got it? So we have two answers. Nachmanides, the Ramban explains, and Hashem was really addressing where he was coming from, where he was in life right now, running away, and telling him continue to run. This is not the right place, go further. The Torah doesn't address all the people that he had to deal with and ideologically battle with, because the Torah is not in the business of mentioning every silliness and conversation that Avraham had with the non-believers, with believers in other gods. Maharal says something radically different, something that touches to the core of what it means to be a Jew, something which touches to the core of what this parsha is teaching us. This parsha is teaching us that there is a Jewish people that are going to live and grace the face of this earth. Where do these Jewish people start? From Avraham Avinu. Why did God choose Avraham? Why did God choose Avraham? It just happened. Avraham was the right candidate because Avraham was just an extension of God. God said, you're going to father a people. We're going to have the same mission. Your mission is going to be an extension of God in this world. You have to bring God's light to this world. That's what it means to behave like a Jew. But you can't opt out. And this started from Avraham Avinu. Beautiful. A few hundred years later, there was a great Rebbe from the sect of Gur, sometimes they call it Ger. In Israel today, they're the largest Hasidic group in Jerusalem. Gur Hasidim had some great Rebbes. One of the Rebbes wrote a book, a sefer called the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes, great scholar, wrote a beautiful interpretation on many subjects in Torah, explanation, commentary. He wrote a commentary in this week's parsha. And he says, Nachmanides asks a question. The Ramban asks a question, right? Why did God choose Avraham? Let's read it in text 6. Fascinating words. The Ramban noted a difficulty in our parsha. That God says, go forth, without first mentioning why Avraham in particular was so precious as to receive such a command. But here's what he answers. You know what he answers? He says, this wasn't a command to Avraham. Lech lecha, God's words that we read in the parsha. Go forth for yourself. Leave your land, your birthplace, and go to the land that I will show you. Wasn't a message to Avraham exclusively. It's God's message to everyone, to all of humanity. Everyone has this calling in life. But you know the difference? Avraham is the only one that listened. He was the only one that actually picked himself up and went. It appears to me that the Holy Zohar sees this very fact as what makes Avraham praiseworthy. He heard the call of go forth, which comes out from God to all people at all times. As it says, Oy to those who sleep in their holes and do not hear. Our father Avraham heard the call and received its message. Perforce the divine word was calling him alone, to him alone, because there was no one but he listening. Certainly, this itself is his greatest praise, that he was ready to receive the call. In other words, I think we can take this as a next stage of the Maharal. This is not negating what the Maharal just said. Everything the Maharal said is true. The Sfas Emes would agree to that. Everyone would agree to that. But this is taking it a step further and saying how just because the Jewish people have a mission to bring godliness into the world and to behave in a certain manner, a godlike manner, that doesn't mean that you can't if you're not Jewish. You could and should be listening to God's voice too. God's call to go forth to the land that I will show you. And if you want to receive blessing, this is the recipe that pertains to you too. But listen to the voice. You got to listen to the call. Avraham listened to that voice. And therefore, Avraham forever and all of his children and descendants were God's chosen nation to make it a reality in this world. But don't think that as an outsider, as a Gentile, that calling isn't for you too. God is asking every single human being to be his ambassador in this world. Every single human being should behave in accordance with appropriate mitzvahs. Everyone should be trying as hard as they could to make the world a more godly place, to reveal God's presence in this world, the true God, the God of Avraham Avinu. If you do that, if you want to jump in on the action and listen and follow God's path for you, you'll be blessed too. It isn't only one blessing. The blessing's for everyone that listens. It just so happens to be that based on the Zohar, the Sfas Emes says, because Avraham picked himself up and went, that's why God said, this is what's in store for you. Because he was ready for the mission. He raised his hand. There was once a Farbrengen in 770 on Purim. The Rebbe was speaking about wealth. You have to remember, right after the Holocaust in the early 50s, the Jewish community was poor as anything in America. They came with nothing. The Chabad community, there was no one with money. Everybody was poor. And the Rebbe once spoke at this Purim Farbrengen about wealth and the challenges that wealth presents. Well, to be wealthy is great, but it comes with challenges. And like in the middle of his words, the Rebbe said, whoever is ready to accept upon themselves the challenge of wealth should raise their hand. I wasn't there. It was way before I was born, in the early 50s. But rumor has it that two people picked up their hand. Two people raised their hand. This Farbrengen. They would never say it, but others said it about them. But be that as it may, right after, the Rebbe was quite disturbed that more people didn't raise their hand. Because the Rebbe said there was an opportunity. I just gave you an opportunity to become wealthy, to receive a blessing from wealth, for wealth. On Purim at this Farbrengen, and this was an opportunity the Rebbe offered to everybody. The call was to anyone who wants, raise your hand. That's all you have to do. Say me, and it will be yours. The two people that raised their hands, that they say, rumor has it, raised their hand, both are very, very wealthy individuals today. One, I think, passed once to the left. Very wealthy individuals. God gave out a calling. Whoever wants, pick yourself up and go to the land that I'm going to show you. Avraham went like this. He was the only one. God said, you raised your hand, it's yours. Nobody else is listening to this calling. Nobody else cares about it, but you do, right? Okay. It's going to be. What happens after that? He doesn't say here. He doesn't say if the opt-in is still available for anyone. Obviously, the opt-in, I'm not talking about the opt-in of being a member of Avram's family, but the opt-in to follow the calling of Hashem, I think most certainly is there for everybody. That opt-in to be an ambassador of God in this world is there for everybody. Everybody should raise their hand and say me. Don't just leave it up to the Jews. We have no opt-out. We're in it. We're Jewish. This is our mission. This is why we're born into this world. But everybody else can learn from that, and everybody else can become more godly and share godly messages, share positive, uplifting messages, behave in accordance with the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and that way, each in their own way continues this light and brings the ultimate purpose of what Avraham started to do, is that God's presence should be revealed in this world. It didn't actualize till 7 generations later at the giving of the Torah in Sinai, and then the building of the tabernacle and the temple. But Avraham started the mission. Avraham was the first one to peel back one layer of the onion, peel back one curtain of the veil. Anyone have any questions? Yes. Well, David, you raise your hand.